Senator Sullivan. Senator Smith.
I also rise to speak on the Privacy Amendment Public Health Contact Information Bill. Now, as we've heard from previous speakers, this bill seeks to amend the Privacy Act by introducing a range of privacy protections for information that Australians provide through the COVID Safe app, the contact tracing app released on the 26th of April 2020. In the best interests of public welfare and in order to assist in Australia's ongoing COVID-19 response, Labor has agreed to support this bill. But notwithstanding this support, Labor is aware of concerns with the functionality of the app, as well as concerns that have been raised by software experts regarding the security of the app, and it's important that in this chamber we speak to these issues today and acknowledge them. Now, downloads of the app number around 5 million, or 20% of the population in Australia, only halfway to where we need to be if we're to meet the Prime Minister's own stated target of having 40% of the population connected to the app. And ultimately, we won't have the public come on board unless they have confidence that their privacy will be protected. And given this government's track record on technology, you can hardly blame them for that reluctance. The app offers an automated version of contact tracing through Bluetooth. It enables users' phone to identify who's near them and prepares a record of who its user has been near. We are told that these records are ready to go in case the user contracts COVID-19, allowing immediate contact to be made with people who have come into contact with the user. The government has stated that the app will only take a very limited amount of personal data from app users, such as your name and mobile number, your postcode and your age range. We have been assured that it won't actually keep track of where a user is or who a user is with. And appropriately, it makes it an offence to collect, use or disclose app data, except in a number of prescribed circumstances, including where the collection, use or disclosure of the data is by a person employed by a state or territory health authority for the purpose of contact tracing. Furthermore, the bill makes it an offence to retain COVID app data on a database outside Australia or disclose COVID app data to a person outside Australia, except where the person is a health official undertaking contact tracing. It also imposes a range of obligations on the government, including to ensure that the COVID app data is not retained on a mobile telecommunications device for more than 21 days, to delete all of an app user's data from the National COVID Safe Data Store as soon as practicable upon request, and delete all COVID app data from the National COVID Safe Data Store when the Health Minister is satisfied that COVID Safe is no longer required to prevent or control the spread of COVID-19 in Australia. And the bill also gives the Privacy Commissioner specific oversight to ensure appropriate enforcement. Now, Labor's Shadow Attorney-General has sought assurances from the government about whether the Privacy Commissioner has sufficient resources to enable her to fulfil the additional oversight responsibilities under the bill, as well as other protective amendments for the bill which are appropriate to seek and appropriate to implement. Ultimately, Labor wants to see this app work. I've downloaded it, as have many of my colleagues. A contact tracing app can be a valuable tool in our fight against coronavirus, but the government needs to be very clear about whether the app works and what protections are in place to protect Australian citizens. We have consistently raised and sought reassurances concerning functionality, privacy and consent. Broadly speaking, we've raised issues at the Senate Select Committee hearing into the COVID response, including why the app doesn't work unless it's open in the background on iPhones, or why it's not compatible with things like the diabetes monitoring app. And I am particularly concerned about what protections there are in place for Australians' data and for Australians' privacy. We need to acknowledge that legislation alone cannot build confidence in the COVID Safe app. It won't give the public the confidence they need to download this on the levels we need to see them downloading at for it to work. And that's why Labor has called on the government to address the technical concerns that have been raised about the app by ensuring the thing works as it should, as it was intended to do. The government needs to provide additional resources to the Privacy Commissioner so Australians can be confident that in addition to having the powers she needs to protect the privacy of app users, she has the resources she also requires to exercise those powers in an appropriate circumstance. And the government needs to be transparent and provide Australians with as much information as possible so they can have confidence in this app and what it means for their data, their privacy and their security. I also want to briefly comment on the awarding of this important contract to Amazon Web Services. Of course, America is one of our enduring allies, a nation-state with which we share many of the same values. And I'm not in a position to pass judgment on why this contract could not be given to a local firm, whether it's an issue of capability, of cost, or a combination of these factors or any other. What I am in a position to say is that data management in the modern world we live in is becoming an ever-growing national security responsibility, which our government needs to manage, and they need to manage better. The same sensitivities that we engage in when it comes to intelligence and national security issues should equally apply here. Just as we engage in issues of sovereignty when discussing the sustainment and rebuild of a nation's submarine fleet, so must we consider the necessity of data sovereignty. Indeed, if there is one sentiment that many Australians have been relaying recently during this COVID-19 crisis, it is that Australia needs to get back to producing things and to reclaim a certain amount of sovereignty so we're able to take charge of our own futures and to be less reliant on others. If there is one thing that Australians are producing plenty of in our digitalised economy, it is data. Some say that data in the 21st century is what oil was in the 18th century, an immensely untapped, valuable asset. Not only would increasing our sovereign capability in this area be good for local jobs and good for our economy, it would also improve our national security credentials. In times of crisis, as we can see here, this matters. I think it's also important that when discussing this app, we take an opportunity to reflect on what is an ever-growing digital divide in Australia. We know that technology is not available to all Australians equally, and that if you have access to technology, you have access to a greater range of opportunities in Australia than if you do not. This divide is growing larger and larger. It's evident, particularly on issues of age, where we know plenty of older Australians have difficulty accessing and using technology. And we've seen for many years this produce negative outcomes for their participation in our economy. If you take the issue of financial payments, for instance, the inability to have access to a smartphone and therefore the certain payment platforms which you have through your phone, which other Australians have, this is very difficult. And during this COVID crisis, when more and more businesses have moved to not accepting cash or trying not to accept cash in exchange for digital payments, that leaves those without access to these sorts of technologies even further behind, even more anxious about how they participate in the economy and how they participate in our world. Now, we are seeing fewer and fewer bank branches, we're seeing fewer and fewer ATMs, we're seeing banks and businesses rely more and more on contactless payments. This app just represents another example like contactless payments, where the divide between those who can afford and access and use technology is far greater. And there are plenty of people, I'm sure, in Australia who would like to download this app, who would like to participate in what the government is doing here, who would like to be part of protecting their fellow citizens from COVID-19, but because of their lack of access to the right technology, they're not able to do so. And that's a conversation we need to have in this place as our reliance on technology grows ever stronger. Indeed, the government's reliance on personal handheld technology in their policy responses grows even stronger. How we ensure that we don't have a whole section of our community left behind by this digital divide. Acting Deputy President, notwithstanding these issues that I've raised, I support the development of this app, and as I said, I did download the app and I was happy to do so and happy to participate in supporting my community and protecting my community to the best I could. If it's used appropriately, if it's implemented properly, it will be an important tool in our fight against this devastating virus. But just because I've said it's important, just because I've downloaded it, does not mean I do not acknowledge the privacy risks and the issues around data sovereignty and digital access that I've raised today. I think it's important that we have that conversation. It's not a single conversation, and it'll be an important part of our role in monitoring the rollout of this app and the use of this app to ensure that those issues are carefully looked at and carefully managed. It's over to the government now on implementation to protect Australians' privacy, sovereignty and ultimately our health. We'll be watching them closely, but in the interim, I'm happy to support this app.